I'm Bob Phillips. Back in 1983, I was asked to prepare a feature story for television about a Joplin firm that repaired department store mannequins. I didn't know it then, but from that beginning, I went on to do over 460 TV features, which were called The Phillips Files. Done in the four-state area, they aired between 1983 and 1997. Along with some talented photographers, we covered a lot of ground, traveling interstate highways and country lanes, up mountains and down hollers, to document the people, places, and things that make up this many-faceted area. Here, then, are a few of the Phillips Files. These items of feathers, buckskins, and beads reflect an Indian heritage centuries old. They're the work of Kurt Foreman of Joplin, one of a shrinking number of Indian artisans who still practice this craft. Using patterns handed down from generation to generation, Kurt designs war bonnets, beadwork, belts, earrings, dolls, and wood carvings. He took up Indian crafts as a hobby when he retired from the military in the 1970s. He's no stranger to this type of art. He learned beadworking by watching his Cherokee grandmother when he was a kid in Oaks, Oklahoma. Today, most work like this is done by tribal elders. Younger generations aren't learning how because it's too tedious and time-consuming. It takes Kurt about 10 days to make a war bonnet, and a beaded belt often requires 2 weeks of work. Perhaps the most eye-catching pieces Kurt makes are the war bonnets. Using turkey feathers, horsehair, and beads, he's made 15 different ones over the years and sold most of them for $500 apiece. Of all the Indian crafts, beadworking is probably the most demanding in terms of patience and concentration. Because of the precision necessary, Kurt says it can be both challenging and frustrating.
When you get a bunch of beads, they're different sizes, and you got to pick the right sizes out of those to make it look right, to have it, straight and uniform. There's a lot of times when everything just falls into place for you, and then other times when everything goes wrong. And when that time comes, I usually just lay it down and go find something else to do.
Kurt often displays his work at area Indian exhibitions and arts and crafts shows. Along with his other projects, he fashions these unusual musical instruments called Indian fiddles. He makes them and plays them. He's also a musician. Kurt is one of a dwindling number of artisans who are working to maintain the legacy of America's Indian culture. By keeping these crafts alive, he's not only honoring the past, he's also preserving history for the future. Bob Phillips, KODE News. The Wings Tour Home is one of the most unique attractions in Eureka Springs. This elegant 1898 Victorian mansion has a year-round Christmas theme and is also home to 20 varieties of exotic birds. Inside, Christmas decorations are everywhere, lending their spirit and color to the period furnishings and stained glass. And then there are the birds. Macaws, parrots, lovebirds, cockatoos, and finches from around the world. Wings is owned by Ron, Mary Lou, and Heather Evans. They bought the house in 1978 and, after restoring it, decided to furnish it permanently with their collection of Christmas memorabilia. The birds came later from such distant countries as South America, Australia, and Indonesia. Ron says with a range of colors from deep red to snow white, they blend in very well with the Christmas theme. If there's a star attraction here, it's probably Arnold, a 5-year-old talking Amazon parrot who laughs, cries, sings opera, and speaks Spanish. The special cages housing the birds, called aviariums, were invented by a Georgia bird fancier and provide a perfectly controlled environment.
The glass helps to protect them from drafts, and your airborne pollens and dust are filtered out through a filter. The lights come on timers 12 hours a day, and so they have equal days and equal nights, much as they do in the tropics, where they all originate. And the lights also put out a certain amount of heat, but you do need to keep the heat in the house at least 70 degrees so that they'll feel at home, because these are tropical birds, and if they were exposed to winter in Arkansas, they would die.
Ron says the cages are so ecologically efficient, the lifespan of the birds could be increased by as much as 300%. Wings is a popular place, averaging about 30,000 visitors a year who come by private car and by the busload. The home is open year-round, and the Christmas decorations and the birds are always on display. This beautiful combination of Victorian elegance, Christmas, and exotic birds is a must-see attraction. Next time you're in town, be sure to visit Wings. You'll find there's something here for everyone. In Eureka Springs, Arkansas, Bob Phillips, KODE News. Dee's Musical Memories in Eureka Springs is a haven for nostalgia lovers. This unique store sells restored antique phonographs and old-time recorded music. Since Dee and Ralph Banta opened the business in 1990, countless visitors have dropped in to gaze fondly at these relics from the past. Known generically as Victrolas, they were made by such companies as Victor, Brunswick, Columbia, and Edison. Currently, the Bantas have 30 Victrolas, and Ralph has restored half of them. This model was among the first produced by Victor in 1906. Thousands were sold back then, but they're pretty rare birds today. This was the world's first portable phonograph. The Poly Oscillator Company made 35,000 of them back in 1922, and this is one of only two known to still exist. This stately top-of-the-line Victor Credenza was made in 1925. Originally priced at $400, it's worth $5,000 today. Ralph says in recent years, collector demand for Victrolas has driven prices sky high.
An unrestored machine will bring from $350 to $750. Used to, 100, 150 would purchase a nice unit. Not anymore. After restoration, they'll run from $1,500 up.
The Bantas have sold 6 restored Victrolas so far, and each time, Dee says, it was like parting with a member of the family.
After you've had it and worked on it and everything, it is kind of sad to see it to go. But most of them, I would say all of them, go to very nice homes, to people that really, really love them. So then, it's not so bad.
Ralph and Dee carry a large stock of original recordings dating back to the turn of the century. The old 78s sell for up to $50, with more recent 45s bringing up to $10. By the way, lest anyone think that only old fogies come in here, Dee says she has a wide age range of customers, from teenagers on up. Once you enter this unique store, you may find it difficult to leave. The music and these grand old machines can conjure up memories without end. It's good to know they're still around. In Eureka Springs, Arkansas, Bob Phillips, KODE News. Porcelain dolls have been status symbols since they first appeared in the 18th century. Today, their perfect faces and contemporary clothing continue to beguile collectors the world over. These aren't genuine antiques. They're the creations of Judy Votes of Erie, Kansas, a multi-talented interior decorator, seamstress, and designer. The dolls, she says, are her hobby. She learned how to make copies of antique dolls by studying doll collector magazines. She learned to form the heads by pouring liquid porcelain into special molds. One tiny mistake in this process, and you start all over again. After firing in a kiln, the head is ready for painting, another step that requires a lot of know-how. Judy dresses her dolls as authentically as possible, preferably using antique fabrics. In all, it takes her 4 to 6 months to build and dress a doll. Though she's made hundreds of them, her favorite is this one named Lily. Copied from a photograph, Lily is dressed in antique finery with vintage beads and real pearl earrings. Judy sells some of her dolls, usually the ones that were custom ordered. To doll collectors, they seem to hold a certain mystique.
Most of the dolls that I sell, somebody will come in and see the doll and say, oh, that looks just like my granddaughter or my mother, something. You know, there's a personal attraction to the doll. Some people collect just for the sake of collecting as an investment. But usually the ones that I've talked to, it's a real personal thing. They really have to have some sort of a connection to this doll.
Dyed-in-the-wool collectors gladly pay $50,000 to $60,000 for a real antique porcelain doll, and Judy's copies aren't exactly cheap. Depending on their size and sophistication, they carry price tags up to $8,000, and they're so perfect, it's difficult to tell them from the real McCoy. Porcelain dolls have been treasured heirlooms for generations, and in pursuit of this ancient doll-making craft, Judy is creating true works of art that are a joy to behold. In Erie, Kansas, Bob Phillips, KODE News. Glenna Dean Green of Joplin sees spots before her eyes every day. Her hobby is collecting Dalmatian dog memorabilia. She has stuffed toys, jigsaw puzzles, plates, candles, books, calendars, shirts, coin banks, and ceramic figurines, just to name a few. She counts 135 items at present, though she says she may have overlooked some. The smallest ones are about a ½ inch high on this set of earrings. The largest is this stuffed toy standing 2 feet high. In her pursuit of unusual items, Glenna Dean has paid as little as $1 and as much as $40. She began collecting this doggy memorabilia in the late 1960s because she had owned 4 real Dalmatians in the past. This breed of spotted dog originated in Dalmatia, a western region of old Yugoslavia. They became famous in America as traditional mascots at fire stations. Called fire dogs, they usually rode next to the driver of the fire truck. In a few places, they still do. For many years, they've been featured as mascots on the Budweiser Clydesdale wagons. Then came the Walt Disney movie, 101 Dalmatians. When this classic film became available recently on home video, the dogs gained even more attention. Glenna Dean admits she'll buy almost anything with a Dalmatian theme.
Well, usually I do, but then some of them aren't that cute. But most of the time I have to have it. You know, I usually do. I don't always go looking for them. They were awfully hard to find at the time I started. Most of them are gifts. Whenever I see one, I buy them. Gift shops, they just pop up here and there.
Glenna Dean is still looking for items for her collection in toy stores, gift shops, and flea markets. She says she'd like to have more Dalmatian plates and music boxes. But if they're not to be found, she says she won't worry.
I've got enough. I could pass up a few.
There aren't too many Dalmatian collectors around these days, but Fire Dog memorabilia keeps coming along all the time. And you can bet when any new item hits the market, it'll end up here in Glenadine's collection. Bob Phillips, KODE News.
Mike Kent of Neosho is one of the best-known wood carvers in the business. A first-class technician, Mike creates woodland creatures that are amazingly lifelike. He uses basswood, cedar, walnut, and butternut. He's even carved pieces from petrified wood. Unlike many carvers, Mike works fast. Using power tools, he can carve a duck decoy and prepare it for painting in 45 minutes, and often works on a dozen different ones at the same time. To date, he's turned out over 1,000, most of them birds, but he's done some pieces most carvers wouldn't even attempt, such as this delicate butterfly, or this pheasant's tail. The feathers look real, but Mike carved each one individually. He's done hummingbirds, chickens, bugs, and snakes. An avid fisherman, he also carves his own plugs. Mike has won a fistful of ribbons in art show competition, and his reputation has been further enhanced by his appearances as host of the PBS television show That Can't Be Wood, which is seen across the country. Mike began his art career as a part-time portrait painter. He switched to wood carving full-time in 1985, and he says he's never regretted it.
This is just a lot more fun. I've always had an interest for wildlife art, and this seemed to be the best of the painting and the sculpture world. And as it developed, I just got that sawdust in my blood, and I just couldn't leave it alone. Portrait painting gave me the basic color mixing and theories on how to paint, and I think the painting is probably the toughest part for most people that try to carve. And I already had that pretty well licked. I had to relearn how to do it with different kinds of acrylics and mediums, and but being full-time, I could sit down and practice and experiment with it all the time.
Depending on size and detail, Mike's artwork sells from $20 to $5,000. For example, this canvas-back drake with an outstretched foot carries a price tag of $3,500. If you'd like, Mike can carve a piece to your specification, but be prepared to wait at least 6 months. He has a big backlog of orders. Mike says he's found his niche in the art world and genuinely enjoys his work. Between his carving and his PBS series, he keeps plenty busy. You're going to be hearing a lot more about Mike Kent in the future. In Neosho, Bob Phillips, KODE News. Don Gutteridge is one of baseball's best-known figures from the 1930s and 40s. He lives today in his hometown of Pittsburgh, where we visited him recently to talk baseball. An infielder, Don was one of the fastest base runners in the game. He had a memorable career. In the majors, by the time he was 20, he played for the St. Louis Cardinals, St. Louis Browns, Boston Red Sox, and the Pittsburgh Pirates, and later managed the Chicago White Sox. In all, his career as player, coach, and manager spanned nearly 40 years. He still keeps his hand in. To this day, he's a scout for the Los Angeles Dodgers. His home is filled with memorabilia, such as these baseballs, signed by such immortals as Ted Williams, Joe DiMaggio, Warren Spahn, and Mickey Mantle. He has ball caps from 3 of his old teams, the Red Sox, Cardinals, and Browns. Photos line the walls. Here's Don with the legendary Frankie Frisch, and here with the one and only Pepper Martin. In the 1930s, Don bought this Kodak movie camera, and with it, he shot thousands of feet of film of his teammates and colleagues. This is superstar Ted Williams in his glory days. Historically, these films are priceless. I asked Don what part of his career he remembers most vividly.
My fondest memory is every time I walk on the ball field out there in the Major League fall, I got a thrill out of it. I mean, I couldn't wait to get to the park. I wanted to play. I loved to play. But probably the one of the biggest moments, of course, was in 1944 when I was with the St. Louis Browns, and we won the pennant on the last day of the season on the last pitch of the ball game. And so it had to be, and that was my first World Series. And of course, that was a big one.
Don played in 2 World Series and 4 All-Star games. All of his movie film from the old days in the major ballparks has been carefully preserved, and some of it has been transferred to videotape. He still gets a kick out of watching these grand old movies, and as he does, you get the distinct impression that he'd gladly go back and do it all over again. You're bound to be a little awed, surrounded by memorabilia like this. Don Gutteridge played with the best of them, and his colorful career is brought into sharp focus by his mementos and his movies. In Pittsburgh, Bob Phillips, KODE News. Viola Neese of Goodman, Missouri, has a rather unusual hobby. She collects glass slippers. They're lined up in cabinets and on shelves in every room of her home. Viola began her collection in 1988 with just 2 glass slippers. Today, she has 175 slippers, boots, and shoes. At first, she wanted only pieces made of glass. They're the focal point of her collection. But now she has items made of bone china, ceramic, pottery, and wood. Since the 1930s, several companies like Fenton Art Glass and Boyd Crystal have made glass slippers as souvenirs to promote their main products such as dishes and glassware. When Viola began collecting, you could buy them for $3 or $4. But today, depending on rarity and color, they carry price tags from $8 up to $1,000. A reference guide and price list has been published on glass slippers. One of the rarer pieces shown in the guide is in Viola's collection. This multicolored slipper of Venetian glass, made in Italy and valued at $100. Slippers come in every color of the rainbow, and Viola says the glass companies keep producing new colors all the time.
The Fenton Company makes a lot. Every time they come up with a new color, they make a glass slipper. And you take the cobalt blue, the ruby, and the carnival glass colors are the most popular. The Boyd Glass Company, I know, makes over 100 different colors of shoes. The Fenton has made 3 different styles of shoes, so there is lots of colors in those shoes.
Viola finds slippers for her collection in flea markets, gift shops, and specialty stores. They seem to be everywhere, she says, until you really start to look for them. And then, like most collectibles, they disappear immediately. But that's part of the fun as Viola continues her search for rare and unusual pieces. This is a collecting field all its own. To find these delicate items takes time and a lot of patience. For every shoe here, there's a story, and Viola knows them all. In Goodman, Missouri, Bob Phillips, KODE News. Tom Bellino of Hiwassee, Arkansas, is in the business of restoring antique trunks, like the kind your parents or grandparents always had around the house. Tom buys and repairs old trunks, and people are always bringing him their family trunks for restoration. They look pretty grungy when they come into the shop, with the wood damaged or missing, leather handles rotted away, and the metal parts rusted out. It takes about 4 to 6 hours to restore a trunk, and Tom charges from $50 to $75 depending on its condition. Most of the ones he works on were made in the late 1800s. He tries to use as many of the original parts as possible to maintain the trunk's historic integrity. But when pieces are missing, he uses spares he keeps on hand. The most popular types of trunk were the flat top, the camel or humpback, and the Jenny Lind. When new, they cost about $8 or $9, a goodly sum in the old days. Today, a restored trunk can bring up to $500. This modified Jenny Lind with leather and canvas fittings was made in St. Louis and, fully restored, could command up to $450. Tom says antique trunks aren't exactly plentiful, but it is possible to find them.
They're not hard to find if you know where to go find them right now. They're getting harder to find all the time, and as I say, particularly on the camelbacks and ones that have any embossing or something unusual, the flat tops are more prevalent than the camelbacks. The camelbacks are, they're around, you got to find them. The price keeps going up and up and up, and of course, if I got to pay more money, I got to charge more money after I've restored them.
Some owners have deep sentimental attachment to these old antiques. To them, they're family heirlooms to be treasured. To others, they make dandy conversation pieces. Some have even been converted into TV, stereo, and VCR cabinets. However they're used, they remain elegant reminders of the past.
Tom says that far from fading in appeal, these old trunks gain in popularity every day. They have a high nostalgia quotient, and it doesn't cost much to fix them up. In Hiwassee, Arkansas, Bob Phillips, KODE News.